The rain came down in sheets, washing the grime of Chicago's streets into the gutters where it belonged. It was the kind of rain that didn't clean anything, just moved the dirt around. Kind of like my job. I pushed open the door to a dim-lit tavern called the Gilded Cage. The name was a joke. Nothing in here was gilded, and the only cage was the one every patron was busy building for themselves, one cheap shot of whiskey at a time. The air was thick with stale smoke and the smell of desperation. It smelled like home. My name is Danny Cole. The nose on my face is a roadmap of bad decisions, bent sideways from a right hook I should have seen coming. The liver under my ribs is a ticking time bomb, and the only thing that's louder is the regret. I used to be somebody in the ring. Now, I'm just a reminder for other people to pay their debts. I saw my mark in the corner booth, a little weasel named Frankie, No Thumb Costello. He got the name after an unfortunate incident with a car door, not because he was a pickpocket. He was nursing a beer, his eyes darting to the door every time it opened. He saw me, and his face went the color of old dishwater. I slid into the booth opposite him. The vinyl was cracked and sticky. "Evening, Frankie." "Danny." His voice was a whisper. "Look, I just need a couple more days. Vince knows I'm good for it." I gave him a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Vince isn't in the business of days, Frankie. He's in the business of now. You know the terms." I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to threaten. My presence was the threat. I was the walking, breathing consequence of a bad bet. I laid my hand on the table, flat. The knuckles were scarred, the veins prominent. Frankie's eyes locked onto them. He started fumbling in his coat, pulling out a sweaty roll of bills. "It's all I got, 200. I'll get the rest, I swear." I counted it. It was short. Of course it was short. It's always short. I took the money and stood up. "Vince will be in touch about the balance." "Danny, please," he started, but I was already walking away. Outside, the rain hit me like a cold slap. I pulled the collar of my worn leather jacket up and hunched my shoulders against the wind. My beat-to-hell sedan was parked half a block down. Inside, I tossed the roll of bills onto the passenger seat. 200 lousy bucks. Vince would take his cut, and I'd be left with just enough for a bottle of cheap gin and a few more hours of not thinking about my daughter, Sarah. A girl I hadn't seen in 2 years. A girl whose mother, Maria, hated the very air I breathed. My phone buzzed. "Vince." I let it ring twice before answering, a little power play that meant nothing and everything. "Cole." "Danny boy." Vince's voice was smooth as polished marble. "Did you have a pleasant chat with Frankie? He's feeling a bit light-fingered, but he's motivated now." Vince chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. "Good. Motivation is the engine of commerce. Listen, I need you to stop by the office. There's something bigger on the horizon, a real opportunity." My heart gave a little thump. Opportunity from Vince Rago was like finding a diamond in a sewer. You knew it was valuable, but you didn't want to know how it got there. "I'm on my way." Vince's office was above a boxing gym I used to train at. The smell of sweat and leather still haunted the hallway, a ghost of a life I'd almost had. His secretary, a woman with a face like a clenched fist, waved me through without looking up. Vince Rago was sitting behind a desk the size of a small car. He was a dapper man, always in a suit with perfectly combed silver hair. He looked like a banker, but his eyes were dead, like a shark's. He was smiling as I entered, gesturing to the expensive leather chair opposite him. "Danny, my boy, sit, drink." I shook my head. "I'm good." "Your loss." He poured himself a glass of something amber and swirled it. "We have a guest coming in from the south. The Diaz brothers, they're particular. We're moving a significant sum for them tomorrow night. A token of goodwill." He let that hang in the air. A significant sum. To Vince, that meant more money than I'd seen in my entire boxing career. "I want you to be there," Vince continued. "Not to collect, to observe, to be a presence. You have a certain intimidating effect, Danny. It's useful." He was setting me up, or he was testing me, or he was just being Vince. It didn't matter. All I could hear was the sound of opportunity knocking, loud and clear. "Where and when?" I asked, my voice flat. He named an old warehouse down by the docks. Midnight. He gave me the details, his smile never wavering. As I left, he called after me. "And Danny, this is a big one. No mistakes." I drove through the rain-drenched streets, the city lights blurring into streaks of color. My mind wasn't on Vince's warning. It was on the bag of cash. a token of goodwill. One last score. That's all it would take. Enough to get out of Chicago, to maybe buy my way back into Maria's good graces, to see my daughter. It was a stupid dream, a fool's hope. But in a city like this, a fool's hope is the only kind you get. I parked outside my apartment building, a brick tomb that smelled of cabbage and failure. Before I went up, I sat in the car and made a call I always hated making. Maria answered on the fourth ring. Her voice was tired. "What do you want, Danny?" Just calling to see how you are. How Sarah is." There was a long silence on the other end. I could picture her rubbing her eyes, the phone pressed to her ear, debating whether to hang up. "We're fine," she said finally. "She's doing well in school. She asks about you sometimes." My throat tightened. "Yeah? What do you tell her?" "I tell her you're busy, that you're working." The irony in her voice was a razor blade. "Was there something else, Danny? I have to get up early." "No, that's it. Just tell her I said hi." "I will." The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, the phone in my hand. The engine ticked as it cooled. The rain drummed on the roof. I thought about Vince's smile, about the bag of cash, about Maria's tired voice. I thought about the busted nose, the failing liver, the daughter I couldn't see. I wasn't a man anymore. I was a debt, and it was time to pay it off, one way or another. The plan was simple, which meant it was stupid. Stupid plans are the only kind people like me have. They're born in cheap bars and honed in desperate minds. My plan was born in the front seat of my beat-up sedan, with the rain washing the city clean and leaving me just as dirty as ever. I spent the next day in a haze. I went to the gym, not to train, but to watch. To smell the sweat and hear the thud of gloves on heavy bags. It was a church I no longer belonged in. The young fighters moved with a grace I'd forgotten, their eyes bright with a fire I'd lost. They saw me and looked away. A ghost, a cautionary tale. That night I drove to the docks. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick and cold. The warehouse was a rusting hulk squatting at the edge of the city, a place where things went to be forgotten. I parked a block away, the engine off, and waited. A black sedan, silent and sleek, pulled up to the warehouse doors. Two men got out, hard-looking types in dark suits. The Diaz brothers, I guessed. A few minutes later, Vince's town car arrived. He got out with another of his goons, a mountain of a man named Sal. I watched them go inside. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it, the point of no return. I got out of my car, the cold air biting at my face. I moved through the shadows, a ghost in my own life. The side door of the warehouse was unlocked, a mistake, or a test. I slipped inside, the silence of the vast space swallowing me whole. Crates were stacked like tombstones. In the center of the floor, under a single bare bulb, Vince and the Diaz brothers were talking, and on the floor between them was a duffel bag, a simple canvas duffel bag. It looked so ordinary, so heavy. I circled around them, staying in the deep shadows cast by the stacks of merchandise. My footsteps were silent on the concrete floor. Years of moving in the ring, of learning balance, of being light on my feet, it all came back to me. This was the fight of my life. Vince handed over a set of keys. One of the Diaz brothers nodded and kicked the duffel bag toward him. The deal was done. They were all smiling. A room full of sharks, all convinced they were the one with the biggest teeth. That was my opening. As they turned to leave, I moved. I didn't think. I just acted. I darted out from behind the crates, grabbed the bag, and ran. The weight of it surprised me. It must have been at least 50 pounds. It pulled at my shoulder, a dead weight of sin and salvation. Behind me, I heard shouts, the sound of a gun being cocked. I didn't look back. I burst out of the side door and into the night. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. I ran like the devil himself was on my heels, and maybe he was. I scrambled into my car, fumbling with the keys, and slammed the door just as a shot rang out, shattering the rear window. I peeled away from the curb, the tires screaming in protest. I didn't stop. I just drove, weaving through the empty streets, the bag on the seat beside me like a sleeping monster. I got back to my apartment and locked the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. I dumped the bag on my bed and unzipped it, and there it was, stacks of bills, more money than I had ever seen. It was beautiful and ugly all at once. It was my ticket out. It was my death sentence. I sank onto the bed, the smell of crisp, new currency filling the room. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. I was free. But as I sat there in the silence of my cheap apartment, a cold feeling started to creep over me. The job had been too easy. The door unlocked, the lack of real security. It felt wrong. Like I hadn't stolen the money, like the money had stolen me. I looked around the room, at the peeling paint and the stained ceiling. I thought about Vince's smile, about the sound of the gunshot. I thought about the weight of the bag. And for the first time since I'd grabbed it, I realized the bag wasn't just heavy with cash. It was heavy with something else. Something rotten. Something that was already starting to seep into my life. The city wasn't going to let me walk away clean. It never does. The money sat on my bed like a bomb. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. Every creak of the building, every shout from the street, had me reaching for the gun I kept in my nightstand, a rusty .38 that had more misfires than hits. I needed to get it out of my apartment, out of my sight. There was only one person I could trust. A mistake, I knew, but the only mistake I had left. His name was Leo. He ran a pawn shop over on Halsted, a dusty mausoleum of broken dreams and forgotten guitars. We'd grown up together, thrown punches at the same gym, failed at the same life. Leo was a man who could sell you his own mother's teeth and make you feel like you'd gotten a bargain. He was also the closest thing I had to a friend. I called him from a payphone at 4 a.m., the rain starting up again, a slow, miserable drizzle. "Leo," I said, my voice a low rasp. "It's Danny." He grunted, the sound of a man pulled from a deep, unhappy sleep. "You know what time it is? You better be dying." Something like that. "I need a favor, a big one." There was a pause on the other end. I could hear him lighting a cigarette. "How big?" "Big enough to get us both out of this stinking city." That got his attention. I told him to meet me at the back of his shop in an hour. I stuffed the money back into the duffel bag, the canvas feeling rough and alive in my hands. It felt heavier than before. Or maybe I was just weaker. Leo was waiting for me under a flickering street lamp, hunched inside a trench coat that had seen better decades. His face was pale, his eyes nervous. "You look like hell, Danny," he said, his eyes immediately dropping to the bag in my hand. "I feel worse." I pushed the bag toward him. "I need you to hold this, just for a day or two." He unzipped it a few inches. The sight of the green inside made his breath catch. He zipped it up fast, his eyes darting up and down the empty street. "Jesus, Danny, what did you do?" "I made a withdrawal from a very unfriendly bank." He licked his lips, the greed warring with the fear on his face. "Who's the bank?" "Vince Rago." Leo went pale. He took a long drag from his cigarette, the cherry glowing like a warning light. "You stole from Vince? Are you insane? He'll skin you alive and use your hide as a doormat. That's why I can't keep it here. You've got that safe in the back, the one you told me about." "Danny, I don't know." "Think about it, Leo," I pressed, my voice low and urgent. "This is it, the last train. We can split it. 60-40. You get the 40 for holding it. No risk, all reward." He looked at the bag, then at me. He saw the desperation in my eyes, the same desperation he saw in the mirror every morning. He saw a way out. He nodded slowly. Okay, Danny, for you, but just for a couple of days. Then we're gone, both of us." "Deal," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. I left him there, a man hugging a bag of money in the dark, and I walked away feeling a little lighter and a whole lot more damned. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in my apartment, the silence screaming at me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Frankie Costello's terrified face. I saw Maria's disappointed eyes. I saw the Diaz brothers, their faces hard as granite. I started seeing things in the periphery, a flicker of movement in a dark corner, a face in the condensation on the window. My own face, but twisted, mocking me. I told myself it was just the gin, the lack of sleep, the city playing tricks on a tired mind. On the second night, the phone rang. It was Leo. His voice was high, thin, panicked. "Danny, they know I have it." I was on my feet, my heart hammering. "What? How?" "I don't know. A guy came in, asked about a stolen duffel bag, said there was a reward. I played dumb, Danny, I swear, but he knew, I could see it in his eyes. "Get out of there, Leo," I yelled into the phone. "Grab the bag and run, now." "I can't. He's outside. He's got friends." The line went dead. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my .38 and ran out of the apartment, taking the stairs 2 at a time. I jumped into my sedan, the engine turning over with a sick cough. I drove like a madman, the city lights a blur, my foot pressed to the floor. I was halfway to Halstead when the engine sputtered. It coughed once, twice, and then died. The car coasted to a stop in the middle of an empty intersection, the rain starting to fall again, harder this time. I slammed my fists against the steering wheel. "No! No, you son of a bitch!" I tried the key again. Nothing. Just a clicking sound. Dead. The city had found another way to hold me down. I got out of the car and started running, the rain soaking me to the bone in seconds. By the time I reached Leo's shop, my lungs were on fire. The front window was shattered. The door was hanging off its hinges. I stepped inside. The place was trashed. Shelves were overturned. Glass crunched under my feet. And there, on the floor behind the counter, was Leo. He was staring at the ceiling, his eyes wide and empty. A single bullet hole in his forehead, neat and clean. The safe in the back was open and empty. They hadn't just taken the money, they'd taken my friend, my mistake, my last pathetic link to a life that wasn't entirely rotten. I stood there in the wreckage of his shop, the rain dripping from my hair onto my face, mixing with the tears I didn't know I was crying. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. They were the hands that had signed Leo's death warrant. The money was gone. My friend was dead, and I was next. The bag wasn't cursed. I was. I was the poison, and everything I touched, I destroyed. The spiral had begun, and the bottom was a long, long way down. The rain had stopped, but the cold had settled deep in my bones. I stood in the ruins of Leo's shop, the smell of cordite and death thick in the air. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to get out, to disappear into the city's concrete veins. But my feet were nailed to the floor. I was looking at my own handiwork. I hadn't pulled the trigger, but I might as well have. Leo's blood was on my hands. The wail of a siren cut through the night, getting closer. It wasn't the mournful cry of an ambulance. It was the sharp, accusatory shriek of a squad car. I was out of time. I stumbled out the back, into a trash-strewn alley. I slipped on a wet patch of God knows what and went down, my hands scraping against grimy brick. I pushed myself up, my body a symphony of aches, and kept moving. I was a block away when the flashing lights painted the storefront in red and blue. I found a cheap motel, the kind that rents by the hour and doesn't ask questions. The clerk didn't look up from his comic book, just slid a key across the counter. The room smelled of bleach and regret. I locked the door, leaned against it, and slid to the floor. The .38 felt cold and useless in my waistband. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark, watching the headlights of passing cars paint stripes across the ceiling. I was a ghost, a man with no name, no money, and no future. The city had me in a chokehold, and it was starting to squeeze. They found me the next morning. Not Vince's men. Not the cartel. The cops. The knock on the door wasn't a knock, it was a battering ram. The door splintered open, and 2 uniforms were there, guns drawn, their faces hard and unforgiving. "Danny Cole? Chicago PD. You're under arrest." I didn't resist. What was the point? I let them cuff me, the metal cold against my wrists. They read me my rights, but the words were just noise. All I could hear was the sound of Leo's body hitting the floor. They took me to a precinct house that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. They put me in a small gray room with a metal table and 3 chairs. A one-way mirror dominated one wall, a dark, unblinking eye. I knew the drill. I sat and I waited. After an hour, the door opened. A man walked in. He wasn't a uniform. He was my age, maybe a little older. He had a tired face, pouches under his eyes, and a suit that looked like he'd slept in it. He carried a file folder and a styrofoam cup of coffee. He sat down opposite me, placed the folder on the table, and took a sip of his coffee. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just looked at me. "Danny Cole," he said finally, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "The South Side Slasher. Haven't heard that name in a while. You had a decent left hook." "I didn't kill him," I said. My voice was hoarse. He raised an eyebrow. "Kill who? We're just having a friendly chat." "I'm Detective Miller." He opened the folder. "Leo Petrov, pawn shop owner, shot once in the head, professional job. You know anything about that?" "No." "Funny," Miller said, not smiling. "Your prints are all over the shop, and a witness saw a man matching your description running from the scene. A man who looked like he'd just seen a ghost." I stared at the one-way mirror. I could see a faint reflection of myself, a tired, broken man with a busted nose and haunted eyes. For a second, I thought I saw Leo standing behind me, his face a bloody ruin. I flinched. Miller noticed. He leaned forward. "You're in a world of trouble, Danny. We have Vince Rago screaming about $1 million heist. The Diaz brothers are missing their money. And now your friend Leo is dead. All roads lead to you." "It wasn't me," I said, but the words sounded weak, even to me. "Sure it wasn't," Miller said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You just happened to be in the neighborhood. Look, Danny, I don't care about Rago or his drug money. That's federal stuff. I care about a dead man in my city. You give me the killer, and maybe I can make some of this go away." "Who'd you steal the money for, Danny? Who killed your friend?" And that's when it hit me. The thought was so cold and clear it cut through the gin and the guilt. The unlocked door, the lack of guards, the way Vince had looked at me when he told me to be a presence. It wasn't a mistake. It was a test. "He wasn't my friend," I said, the words coming out slow. "He was my mistake." Miller leaned back, studying me. "What are you talking about?" "Vince," I said, the realization dawning like a dirty sunrise. "He wasn't moving money for the Diaz brothers. He was setting a trap. He thought he had a leak in his organization, someone feeding info to the competition. He put the money out there like cheese, waiting to see which mouse would take it." I looked at Miller, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of understanding in his tired eyes. "It wasn't about the money," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "It was never about the money. It was about finding the rat, and I was the stupidest rat in the maze." Miller took another sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving mine. He knew I was right. He could see it in my face. I hadn't just stolen a bag of cash. I'd stolen a trap, and now the trap had snapped shut, with me right in the middle. "So Vince killed Leo to tie up the loose ends," Miller said. It wasn't a question. "And to send me a message," I finished. "He wants me to run. He wants me scared." "Is it working?" Miller asked, a ghost of a smile on his lips. I looked back at the one-way mirror, at my own pathetic reflection. I was a dead man walking. The cops thought I was a killer. Vince and the cartel thought I was a thief, and I was just a fool who wanted to see his daughter again. "Yeah," I said, "it's working." Miller stood up and picked up his folder. "Well, Danny, it's been a pleasure. We'll be in touch." He walked to the door, then paused. "You know, for a washed-up boxer, you're not as dumb as you look. That's your problem. You're just smart enough to see the train coming, but not smart enough to get off the tracks." He left, and the lock on the door clicked shut. I was alone again with my reflection, but now I knew the truth. The money wasn't cursed. I was. And the devil I had to pay wasn't some supernatural force. It was Vince Rago, and he always collected his dues. I had one last call to make, a call to a life I'd lost, a call to Maria. It was a stupid, desperate move, but I was a stupid, desperate man. I had nothing left to lose, and when a man has nothing left to lose, he's the most dangerous man in the world. The guard who brought me the phone looked bored, like he was processing 1,000 requests just like mine every day. He probably was. I took the black plastic receiver, my hands slick with sweat. The number was etched in my memory, a number I'd dialed 1,000 times when it meant something, and 100 times since it meant nothing. It rang 5 times before she picked up. "Hello?" Her voice was a shield. I could hear the TV on in the background, the sound of a sitcom laugh track, a normal life, a life I'd blown to pieces. "Maria," I said. My voice cracked. Silence. The laugh track faded into the background. She knew. A call from me at this hour could only mean one thing. "Danny," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "What have you done?" "It's bad, Maria. Real bad." I leaned my forehead against the cold concrete wall. "I'm in trouble, the kind you don't walk away from." "I'm not surprised," she said, but there was a tremor in her voice now. The shield was cracking. "Are you in jail?" "Yeah, for now. But that's the least of it. There are people, bad people. There are always bad people with you, Danny." "I know," I said, the words tasting like poison. "I know. I'm not calling for money. I'm not calling for a lawyer." I took a breath, the hardest one of my life. "I need to talk to Sarah. Just for a minute, please." "No," she said instantly. "Absolutely not. I won't have you dragging her into your sewer. She's a good kid, Danny. She's clean. She's forgotten what you look like." The words hit me like a body blow. "Please, Maria, just let me hear her voice. Tell her it's her dad. I won't tell her where I am. I won't say anything bad. I need to remember what I'm fighting for." I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, a long, heavy sigh, a war being fought behind a single, tired breath. You're not fighting for anything, Danny. You're just dying. You've been dying for years. Please, I whispered. Another silence. Then I heard her muffle the phone. I heard her faint voice calling Sarah's name. My heart hammered against my ribs. A few seconds later, a small, clear voice came on the line. Daddy? It was a bullet. A single, perfect bullet that went straight through my chest. All the air left my lungs. I was a heavyweight contender who'd just taken a dive from a featherweight. Hey, sweetheart, I managed to say, my voice thick. How are you? Are you coming home soon? Mommy said you were working. Yeah, buddy, I said, the lie burning my throat. I'm working. I'm just calling to say I love you and that you should be good for your mom, okay? Okay, I love you too, Daddy. I heard Maria take the phone back. That's enough, Danny. Thank you, I said, the words breaking. Thank you, Maria. Don't thank me, she said, her voice cold again, the shield back in place. Just leave us alone, for good. The line went dead. I stood there for a long time, the receiver still pressed to my ear. I had what I wanted. I'd heard my daughter's voice, and it had broken me completely. It was the final payment on a debt I didn't even know I owed. Now I had nothing left to lose. I walked back to the interrogation room. Miller was waiting for me, leaning against the wall. Touching family moment, he asked, a cynical smirk on his face. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. He saw it in my eyes. The shift, the despair had curdled into something hard and sharp. You're a dead man, Cole, he said, his voice losing its sarcastic edge. Vince Rago has people in this building. You won't make it to morning in a holding cell. I know, I said. He looked at me for a long moment, then made a decision. It was in the set of his jaw, the way he pushed himself off the wall. There's a fire escape down the hall, third door on the left. The lock is busted. I'm going to go get a coffee, a long one. He turned and walked away. He wasn't helping me. He was throwing me to the wolves. He was flushing the rat out of the sewer so the bigger rats could feast. It was the coldest, most professional kindness I'd ever been shown. I didn't hesitate. I walked out of the room, my steps sure for the first time in days. The hallway was empty. I found the third door, pushed it open, and stepped out into the cool night air. The fire escape was a rusty ladder leading down into an alley. I climbed down, my body moving with a purpose it hadn't felt in years. I was free. But I was a free man in a city that wanted me dead. I had no money, no friends, and a target on my back. But I had one thing I didn't have before: clarity. I knew what I had to do. I found a payphone and dialed a number I hadn't used in 10 years. Vince Rago's private line. He answered on the first ring. I was wondering when you'd call, Danny. Did you enjoy your chat with the police? I want to meet, I said, my voice flat. Just you and me. He chuckled. You're in no position to make demands, my boy. You're a ghost, a nuisance. You set me up, I said. The money was bait. I was the rat you were looking for. The line went quiet. The chuckle was gone. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. It's a shame. It's what got you into this mess. I have the money, I lied. It was the only card I had to play. No, you don't, Vince said, his voice smooth as silk. I do. I retrieved it from your friend's shop. A messy business, but necessary. The bottom fell out of my world. It was all for nothing. Leo died for nothing. My entire desperate flight was for nothing. But I'll meet you anyway, Vince continued. For old time's sake. The same place. Midnight. Come alone, and bring your ghosts with you. He hung up. I stood there in the phone booth, the city lights spinning around me. He had played me from the start. He had the money. He had won. But he was still going to meet me. Why? Because he wanted to see it. He wanted to see the look on my face when he crushed the last bit of hope out of me. He wanted to enjoy the kill. I looked at my watch. It was 11:30 p.m. I had 30 minutes to get to the warehouse. 30 minutes to walk into my own execution. But I wasn't going as a victim. I was going as a witness. I was going to make him look me in the eye when he did it. I was going to pay the devil, and I was going to make damn sure he enjoyed the payment. The warehouse was a skeleton in the moonlight. I pushed the same side door I'd used for the theft, and it groaned open, a dying man's last breath. Inside, the single bare bulb from the other night was gone. The only light came from a high, grimy window. slicing through the darkness and illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny lost souls. Vince Rago was standing in the center of the floor, exactly where we'd stood before. He was alone. He wasn't holding a gun. He was holding the duffel bag. My duffel bag. He looked like a conductor waiting for his orchestra to tune up. "Danny," he said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Right on time, punctuality. I always admired that about you. It's a shame you couldn't apply that discipline to anything else." I stopped 20 feet from him. The air was cold, heavy with the smell of rust and damp concrete. "You got what you wanted, Vince. The money is back in your hands. Why am I here?" He smiled, a thin, cruel slash in the dim light. "Closure, Danny. Every good story needs an ending. And our story, well, it's run its course. You were a good employee for a time, loyal, but loyalty is a commodity, and yours was depreciating." "It was never about a leak," I said. "You just wanted to see who was greedy enough to take the bait." "Bait is such an ugly word," he said, patting the bag. "I prefer to think of it as a character assessment, and you, my boy, failed. You saw a shortcut, a way out of the miserable little life you built for yourself. You didn't even stop to think why it would be so easy." "I was thinking about my daughter," I said, the words coming out flat, hard. "Ah, yes, the daughter," Vince said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "I heard you called her, a touching final gesture. Did it make you feel better? Did it make you feel like a man?" "It made me feel like I had nothing left to lose." "Exactly," Vince snapped, his smile vanishing. "And a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous animal of all, which is why we're here, to put the animal down." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a silenced pistol. It looked small, delicate, and utterly final. "You see, Danny, the Diaz brothers were displeased. They don't care about the money anymore. They care about respect. They want a head, a trophy, and you, my friend, are the perfect size." So that was it. I wasn't just a loose end. I was a peace offering, a sacrificial lamb to soothe the egos of a couple of psychopaths. It was so perfectly brutally Vince. "You're not going to kill me yourself?" I asked. "Too messy?" He shrugged. "I'm a businessman, Danny. I delegate." He gestured with the gun toward the far corner of the warehouse, where a larger shadow detached itself from the darkness. Sal, the mountain of a man. He was holding a length of rusty chain. I didn't look at Sal. I kept my eyes on Vince. "You know, for a smart guy, you made one mistake." Vince raised an eyebrow. "Oh, do tell." "You brought the bag," I said. "You couldn't resist showing me, rubbing my nose in it." "It's the star of the show," Vince said. "The reason for the season." "It's the reason you're going to die," I said, and I reached into my pocket and pulled out my Zippo lighter, the one Leo had given me for my 30th birthday, engraved on the side, to Danny, may your luck turn." It hadn't. Vince frowned, confused. "What are you going to do, Danny?" "Singe my eyebrows," I smiled then, a real smile. The first one in years. It felt like my face was cracking. "No, I'm going to collect my debt." With my other hand, I reached into my inside jacket pocket and pulled out the half-empty bottle of gin I'd been nursing. I'd poured some on the floor around me while I was talking, the smell masked by the dampness of the warehouse. I flicked the Zippo open. The spark caught. A small, brave flame danced in the darkness. "Don't be a fool," Vince said, his voice tight for the first time. "Too late for that," I said, and I tossed the lighter. It landed in a puddle of gin I'd poured at my feet. The flame whooshed to life, a blue-orange serpent that slithered across the concrete, heading straight for the bigger puddle I'd left near a stack of old wooden crates soaked in who knows what. The fire erupted with a hungry roar. Sal took a step back, startled. Vince's face, for a split second, was a mask of pure panic. He had the money, but he was about to be trapped in a furnace. He made a choice. He turned and ran for the side door, abandoning his muscle, abandoning his grand finale. He was a survivor, a rat leaving a sinking ship. The fire spread fast, licking at the old timber supports, sending showers of sparks into the air. The heat was immense, a physical force pushing me back. Sal was lumbering toward me, the chain in his hand, his face a mask of rage and fear. I didn't run. I walked toward him. I was a boxer again. The roar of the fire was the roar of the crowd. The smoke was the haze of the arena. He swung the chain, a wild, clumsy arc. I ducked under it, the wind of it whistling past my ear. I came up inside, driving my fist into his solar plexus. It was a punch from 10 years ago, a ghost of a punch. It didn't have the power it once did, but it had the surprise. He grunted, the air rushing out of him. I hit him again, a hook to the jaw. He staggered back, tripped over a loose floorboard, and went down hard. He didn't get up. The ceiling groaned above me. A burning timber crashed down, blocking the way out. I was trapped. I looked around. The fire was everywhere, a wall of orange and red, and there, lying on the floor where Vince had dropped it, was the duffel bag. I stumbled over to it. The canvas was starting to smolder. I picked it up. It was still heavy, still full of all the things I thought I wanted. I slung it over my shoulder. I looked for a way out and saw none. Just flames and smoke and the inevitable, crushing end. I thought of Sarah's voice. "I love you too, Daddy." I thought of Maria's cold final words. "Just leave us alone." I thought of Leo's empty eyes. I'd tried to buy my way out of hell, only to find I was the one selling the tickets. I sank to the floor, my back against a stack of crates that were already starting to char. The heat was unbearable. I held the bag of money in my lap like a championship belt I'd never won. The smoke filled my lungs, thick and choking. I closed my eyes. The last thing I saw wasn't Maria's face or Sarah's. It was Vince Rago's smile. And the last thing I heard was the crackle of the fire, consuming the warehouse, consuming the money, consuming me. The bill had come due, and in Chicago the devil always paid in cash.